And I think we all appreciate here the raftar of the changes that are going on in our industry. For more than a decade now, India has been a red hot market for aviation growth. Over the 12... I'm sorry?
Ministers just joined.
Oh, sure.
Gujarat के cases are not controlled. Two very powerful women.
Sir.
Check. So it's okay. Nobody has even noticed that I started before. Please start. Okay, yeah.
Click for the screen.
Please push along the screen.
So training is very important in the aviation industry. So I have good training now. I can start again. So Honorable Union Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharamanji, Honorable Union Minister of Civil Aviation, Housing and Urban Affairs, Commerce and Industry, Shri Hardip Puri Ji, Secretary Moka, Shri Pradeep Singh Karola Ji, Shri Srinivas Ji, Chairperson of IFSCA, Senior Economic Advisor, Srimati Vandana Agarwal Ji, my dear industry colleagues and friends, Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and on behalf of FICCI, very warm welcome to this significant aircraft leasing summit, Rupi Raftar. And I think we all appreciate here the Raftar of the changes happening in our industry. For more than a decade now, India has been a head-up market for aviation growth. And over the last 12 months, we have learned that resilience is as important as growth and profit. Our industry has been tested in the most radical way by COVID, but we reacted, we adapted. We're still not fully out of the woods yet. We're still facing some headwinds with the virus and the complexity of the situation. But in the midterm, we will have tailwind with the vaccination, with people's desire to fly again, and with the development of an indigenous aircraft leasing and financing industry. I believe in the intrinsic strengths of the Indian aviation industry because we can rely on multiple assets. We can rely on a large domestic market. We can rely on resilient airlines. We have a geographical locational advantage. And also we have best-in-class aircraft and a large talent pool available. There is an additional pivotal piece of the puzzle that is falling in place now with the development of a vibrant aircraft leasing and financing industry. And I believe this will further trigger, this will further boost the recovery and the growth of the aviation industry, not only in India, but also in the world. As we know, the Indian government has put in place the essential regulatory and taxation elements that will support the creation of an India-based offshore aircraft leasing sector at the Gift City in Gujarat. And FICCI thanks the Honorable Finance Minister for her recent budget announcements on the topic. I think it's time now to listen to the passionate and incisive discussions on this topic that will happen in the frame of the two technical panels that we will have today following this inaugural session. And once again, on behalf of FICCI, let me welcome all dignitaries and delegates to this momentous event that will mark the formal rollout of Indian aircraft leasing industry. Now, let me welcome on stage Shri Tushar Sachade from PwC, Srimati Upasena Rao from Trilegal, and Shri Alok Anand from Acumen for the release of their respective knowledge paper. Please.
All three. Okay.
Well, thank you everyone and enjoy the summit. Thank you.
Could my PPT please be put up? Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here amongst all the dignitaries on the dais and Honorable Finance Minister, who has taken so much of the political mileage to get this program launched and to take all the courageous decisions that are needed to give tax breaks. While my PPT comes on, I'll just very briefly say that I have been associated with this project from the word go. I chaired the working group which came out with the Rupi Raftar project report in January 2019, and it has been an absolutely marvelous journey going forward since then. The idea has been to make India the next aviation hub, and one of the most important things for that is to bridge a lacuna, which is the need for in-house lessors. If we just simply look at the three top aviation countries, one, United States, 70% of their aircraft are managed through in-house or US lessors. China, which has joined the game very recently, also has 60% of its aircraft leased by in-house lessors. However, India, which is the third player, has no lessors based in India. What are the compulsions for doing so? Apart from the strategic compulsions, we have a very large order book. We have phenomenal growth in air traffic. For instance, at present, our order book is the third largest in the world at 1,028, and China's order book is 1,037, just 9 more than that of India. We are set to become the third largest aviation market as well. There is revenue potential. It is expected to generate an annual lease revenue of about $5 billion and tax revenue of about 200 million from ancillary activities annually. It's critical to develop India's skill set also to improve self-reliance, and the total value of India's commercial jet backlog at present is US dollars 19.32 billion. The journey so far although it started with the working group report, it actually got coalesced into a project when we had the regular union budget announcements on in the 5th July 2019 regular budget, wherein it was a serious commitment of the government that that the time is ripe for India to enter into aircraft financing and leasing. Thereafter, we moved very swiftly into actually consolidating the tax and regulatory asks and to take them up with all the ministries concerned. Every day it used to be a journey of consensus building with the ministries concerned. Jumping straight to August 2020, that's when the Gujarat government announced the exemption from stamp duty. That was again a very game-changing event, and in October, the IFSC authority was accorded power as a unified regulator, again a unique proposition, and we have been working very closely with IFSCA to move forward on all the regulatory asks that were there, and this actually got maximum propulsion or acceleration when aircraft leasing was notified in October 2020 itself as a financial product in IFSC. Since then, we had been working on the regulatory framework, aircraft leasing framework, which was issued on 15th February 2021. Now, what are the key attractions in all the journey that we have taken up till now? I will leave this for the detailed panel to take up, but just to run through very quickly, it's a huge amount of work. It's a low-cost structure. There's a proactive regulator. It's light touch regulation, but in a strong framework. There's a dispute resolution mechanism. Tax holidays, tax incentives, which have been announced by the Honorable Finance Minister, they are game-changing and they make the overall financials of aircraft leasing very competitive as compared to global hubs, in fact, if not better. There is no capital gains tax. There's a 10-year tax holiday consecutive out of 15 years which can be chosen. No other country has that. Everywhere else, there is risk associated with how much tax you would have to pay, and Ireland is a very important example. There's nil MAT, no withholding tax on interest payments. There's no dividend distribution tax. The shareholder of that particular country pays it as per their regime. So it's no different from others. No basic customs duty, no stamp duty, robust DTAs. We have GR waivers for termination of tax leases. We have GR waivers for whenever an aircraft is to be parted out. There is, very interestingly, convergence with defense, because leasing is now being envisaged even for defense aircraft, the non-militarized ones. We have an international treaty as well, which governs the regulatory framework. Very simply on this is the nutshell of what has been done till now. A globally competitive aircraft leasing regime. If we run through the numbers, just the bottom total tax and duties is sufficient to show that, assuming a normal lease, which is a 12-year lease, the total tax and duty ask in Ireland is 3.06 million. The total tax ask is 3.06 million in IFSC Gift City as well. And the journey from 8.72 million to 3.06 million has been really swift. This is, in a nutshell, the mood of the government. The market potential is obvious. I will actually take up these numbers, etc., in the panel. I know that everybody on the dais is very anxious to contribute to our important deliberations. Just to say, these are the blips. One figure that I would like to bring to your notice is India, although we have the 7th largest market by jet fleet, even under COVID conditions, India's sale and lease transactions took place. So the market is there, the mood is there, the tax environment is there. Let's go for it. The time is right. Thank you so much.
Namaskar and good afternoon to all. Honorable Finance Minister, Honorable Minister for Civil Aviation, Mr. Injati Srinivas, Shri Uday Shankar, President FICCI, my colleague Vandana Agarwal, dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. As we all know, India has steadily built an environment where the aviation industry is sustainable, affordable, safe, and environmentally competitive, and connects to all parts of India and the world. This policy-induced, policy-backed development has favorably pushed growth and positively catalyzed key growth factors in the industry, leading to expansion of low-cost carriers, modernization of airports, bringing in foreign direct investment in the domestic airline sector, and deployed advanced technological interventions and emphasized on regional connectivity. From about 700 aircraft at present, the number of aircraft is scheduled to increase to about 1,200 in the next few years. To this fleet, there will be freighters, which currently at 6 last year have increased fourfold, and today we have got 25 freighters in the country. Financing of aircraft, the airlines have found the lease financing to be the most suitable option. Leasing is an efficient means to fulfill short-term capacity requirements without burdening the balance sheet of the airlines. Aircraft financing is also the most profitable segment of aviation value chain. Currently, foreign financiers and lessors are the biggest beneficiaries of India's growing aviation strength. Unfortunately, so far, not a single aircraft has been leased from within India. And that's the challenge we faced. We have been working on this challenge for the last 3 years. And about 3 years back, a report was submitted by the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Drawing upon the recommendations of this report, a number of direct and indirect tax concessions and non-tax regulatory measures have been provided in the union budgets of 2019-20, 2021, and in the recent budget of 21-22 to bring the International Financial Services Center, IFSC in India, at par and better overall for transactions from out of IFC in other countries for both Indian carriers and foreign carriers. As a result of these reforms, India has created a highly efficient system for aircraft leasing and financing, which is comparable to that of Ireland, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and anywhere in the world. As a result of all these reforms, green shoots are visible now. And if I can share the details, first, Acumen Aviation, an Ireland-based lease manager and lessor, would be participating in the aviation lease financing activities in Gift City in Gujarat. Further, addressing the important issue of skills development, Acumen Aviation would be starting a 1-year postgraduate dedicated program in aircraft leasing and financing. VMan Aero, a Mumbai-based aviation consultancy and asset management company, is setting up an aircraft leasing company called VMan Aero Services LLP. Fourthly, Investec, one of the leading lessors in the world, would be setting up its subsidiary at the Gift City. Jet Set Go Aviation Services Private Limited, an Indian private jet operator, is in the process of establishing a leasing entity at Gift City. SpiceJet has pioneered seaplane operations in India, and they are considering leasing of subsequent seaplanes from within India. HAL is in the process of finalizing the lease agreement with Alliance Air for 2 Dornier aircraft, which will also explore channelizing through IFSC. With all these green shoots available, it is the time when lease financing activity is about to take off in India. Our focus has always been to build an unprecedented double-digit growth of Indian aviation sector and to weave the vision of manufacturing aircraft, helicopters, and associated equipments and services for the civil aviation sector in India. It is a pleasure to have such an esteemed list of dignitaries who would be participating in these panel discussions. And I'm sure the deliberations would lead to results and conclusions and recommendations so that this fledgling leasing financing industry comes out as a global, vibrant lease financing industry around which Indian aviation would revolve. So thank you very much, and we look forward to deliberations. We wish all the best.
Honorable Finance Minister, Honorable Minister of Civil Aviation, my colleague Shri Karola, distinguished guests on the dais, distinguished guests and participants who are physically present here, and those who are participating in this event online. I'm very delighted to be a part of this event where we are looking at making India a global hub for aircraft leasing and financing. I think this assumes greater significance in the context of the newly established IFSC in India and the renewed animal spirits leashed by the Atmanirbhar Bharat strategy launched by the Government of India. We are all aware that we are amongst the largest economies in the world. We are also the fastest growing economy in the world. So it is no surprise that we also have one of the largest aviation markets in the world. Being poised to be the third largest aviation market in the world, and generating, huge demand for aircrafts. We are ideally suited to not only serve our own interests, but also act as a hub for rest of the world. If you look at the aviation financing and how we are positioned, we have many advantages. One, unlike the past when airlines used to purchase aircrafts and have large fleets, so a lot of deployment of capital upfront and lack of flexibility, the problem of obsolescence, catching up with new technologies emerging in the aircraft industry. We now have the leasing industry which is flourishing, which gives a much more flexible option to the airlines. Our airlines have the advantage of 85% of the fleet under leasing arrangements. So they're very flexible. If you look at an airline like Indigo, they change their entire fleet every 4 years. So they're absolutely, having state-of-the-art technology aircrafts with them all the time. I think if you look at the quantum of financing which is required, it is enormous. Already an order book of 1,000 which has been mentioned, valued at say 50 billion. But if you look at the next decade or 2 decades, the average financing requirement which we could assess exceeds 10 billion a year. Now this would include equity financing and other forms of financing. And this is where I think the opportunities are generating. There are a lot of interlinkages and synergies in the financial sector. GIFT IFSC, as you're aware, we have a unified regulator, that is the IFSCA, which looks at all the 4 segments of the financial market: the banking sector, the insurance sector, the funds, and the securities market. All of these can actually play a very important role in airline financing because you have different structures which are now coming up. So the first and foremost is that we are till today a consumer of international financial services, whereas we can actually be a producer of international financial services. That is what Atmanirbhar is about. It's not about isolating ourselves, but mainstreaming ourselves, not only meeting our own demands, but also meeting the demands of the rest of the world. I think here a lot of initiatives in very short span of time were taken. Firstly, the operating lease, which is today a very popular instrument, was in some sort of, whether it's a financial service or whether it's not a financial service, as per the Banking Regulation Act, it's not a financial service. So that issue had to be first tackled, and that was tackled by notifying it as a financial service under the IFSCA Act. So that is the first step. And after that, we as a regulator, and as a regulator we are also a developer. It's a combination, the dual role, which prompted us to interact with all stakeholders of the industry, and then we were absolutely convinced that there is no reason why we cannot emerge as a hub for the global aircraft leasing and financing industry. And 2 or 3 issues. One is what sort of regulatory framework is required. 2 is what sort of tax incentives are required. That's very important. 3, what sort of accounting standards are in play. All these issues were looked into. And we have been able to bring out a special framework for operating lease. So this is what I wanted to mention. We have not yet brought out the framework for other types of lease, whether it is leveraged type of lease or a direct loan arrangement, because those will come in the realm of finance companies, and those guidelines will come out separately. So I think now we have set the sort of ground for people to come here and establish business, fully realizing that many of the lessors may not be able to manage the complexities of aircraft leasing, even asset manager, aircraft asset manager has been introduced as an auxiliary player. That means though they are not performing any financial service, we have said that it is an auxiliary service to delivery of a financial service, so they will be a regulated entity under the IFSCA. So I think these steps have been taken, and this is just the beginning. And if we look at the demand which is there, the proactive initiatives which the government is taking, especially in UDAN, etc., I think a lot of potential is there for aircrafts to be leased from out of GIFT IFSC. And not only wide-bodied and narrow-bodied aircraft, but also small aircrafts and helicopters. There also the potential is enormous. 4-fold, 5-fold growth can be there over the next 10 years. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity. I am very confident that we would be successful, and within a time frame of 5 to 7 years, we should be a visible hub for aircraft leasing at the global level. Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to welcome and to invite the Honorable Minister for Civil Aviation. The Honorable Minister has been the architect of resurgence of India under COVID-19 conditions, and he has been unleashing the promise of the sector. I welcome him, sir.
Honorable Finance Minister, Shrimati Nirmala Sitharaman ji, my colleague Pradeep Singh Kharola ji, Secretary in the Ministry of Civil Aviation, Shri Injeti Srinivas ji, Chairperson International Financial Services Central Authority, Vandana Agarwal ji, President of FICCI, Shri Uday Shankar ji, the Head of Airbus India, Remy Maillard, may I say G? You may. My friend Shireen Bhan, ladies and gentlemen, valued stakeholders in the Indian civil aviation sector, members of industry, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. I am particularly pleased to be able to join a meeting of this sort. I'm not saying this because the Honorable Finance Minister has virtually joined with us today, but I have long maintained that the paradigmatic shift that is taking place in Indian civil aviation is on account of a large number of factors. But the two developments which resonated in the budgets, last 2 or 3 budgets, those relating to the establishment of MROs and financial services, in particular aircraft leasing, I think are what is going to provide that cutting edge to provide that transformative change. Let me, for purposes of for record, and because I have a captive audience who are stakeholders and who know more about the sector than I do, place before you a few propositions. And I believe in some respects they are self-evident truisms. One, already alluded to, that today we are the world's 3rd largest domestic civil aviation market after the United States, first China and then the United States. But let me say, as everyone seems to agree, that within a very short period of time, we will be the world's largest, 3rd largest civil aviation market in overall terms. Point 1, or submission 1. Submission 2, when everyone said that the pandemic, the COVID pandemic was a major disruption, well, I think that's an understatement, if one can be called that. It was perhaps something as disruptive. I was ambassador in Geneva and New York when we dealt with H1N1, SARS, Ebola, but this was more like the Spanish flu of 1918. But contrary to all the prophets of gloom and doom, including some of my friends in the political arena, especially on the left of center liberal variety, we have not only been able to weather and navigate through that turbulence, but today in terms of domestic civil aviation, we are almost at pre-COVID levels. These days, when we get a figure of 300,000 passengers a day, we started with 30,000 on 25th May when we opened up after a total lockdown. We are not happy, we are a little disappointed because the Secretary and I have been thinking that we would have reached 350,000 by now. But we've always covered ourselves, qualified anything that we say. It depends on the behavior of the virus. So if a mutation or a new strain comes in, there's a little bit of hesitation, but let me stick my neck out. By the time we open the summer schedule, I believe on 1st April, we will be at full pre-COVID levels of domestic traffic or even higher. That civil aviation is a critical driver of economic growth, there has never been any doubt in. Between the years 2013 and 14 and 2019-20, our domestic growth has been 14% per annum. The best year was when we had, with just a 7% penetration, which means out of 100, only 7 people fly, we had a 17% rate of growth. But on an average, it comes to 14%. Even in the pre-COVID times, if you leave out the first quarter, that is April, May, and June of 2020, and look at it after that, there is a sharp recovery. Commensurate with the growth potential of the Indian aviation sector in the next 20 years, we will need something like 1,750 to 2,100 aircraft valued at roughly US dollars 290 billion with an estimated 100 deliveries each year or about $5 billion of financing each year. Commercial aircraft are globally mobile assets that can be rapidly redeployed to serve the strongest market. The share of these aircraft on lease globally has increased in the last few decades. It escalated from 2% in 1980 to over 41% in 2018 and is estimated to have reached 50% in 2020. When the Secretary and I brainstorm on how many aircraft we will need, let me, in the interest of full disclosure, tell you we have a healthy disagreement. Being a good civil servant, something that I left behind many years ago, he's always conservative. And I remind him that when one of the largest carriers ceased operations between sometime November 2018 and April 2019, at that stage we had 560 aircraft in the sky. And as is our habit, you know, because we are an intelligent people, we are more analytical and therefore more critical. So we say, my God, one air carrier down, which means Indian civil aviation market is going to collapse. Well, we lament the cessation of operation of any air carrier, past, present. We hope no other air carrier ceases operation. But I can tell you, the inner strength and resilience of the market is that when that carrier stopped operations, we had 560 aircraft in the sky. My secretary said 700, actually it's about 740 already. And in the next few years, we'll be adding 100, 200, 300 aircraft every year. So the target that we are looking at is not 1,200. That we will reach very quickly. We are looking at 2,000 aircraft operating the domestic civil aviation and international. My friend, the head of Airbus, looks very happy because given the global market share, a certain defined percentage goes to him all the ways. So it's a good collaborative effort. But to me, as a student of civil aviation, and I'm new to this sector, how can you have a situation that there are nearly 1,000 aircraft in the Indian skies already, even on the existing numbers? that if they need any maintenance or repair, you have to take them to Singapore, you have to take them to Sri Lanka. So I'm immensely grateful to my senior colleague Nirmala ji, who's here, who in the budget announced things, and then on the basis of those announcements, we have been able to work out an ecosystem. So not only the major aircraft manufacturers, but those running the airlines, those who require maintenance, will be able to take advantage. We have many, I could go into long distance. We have in Gujarat, we have in Bangalore, we are now sending setups near here. I'm not going to go into those details, but the important thing is MRO in India is coming of age. And I believe, and I'm very clear, if you are in business and you make a success of it, as we are in civil aviation, you will not only be doing the maintenance and repair of the aircraft flying the Indian skies, but all the other countries around India, which are major civil aviation operator, certainly Bangladesh, Southeast Asia, etc. And that is where India is growing. When I joined the Indian Foreign Service many, many years ago, and I went on my first posting, the number of passengers who traveled from, it was called then Palam International Airport, was 1 million passengers a year. Today, Indira Gandhi International Airport does 70 million. The airport operator tells me when he has his 4th runway going, before long, it will be close to 100 million. And then when you have Jewar operational by 2024, it will be 140 million, which will be more than the combined traffic done by London Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, etc. We are developing hubs in India. I mean, make no mistake, Delhi and Jewar will be a big hub. Mumbai and Navi Mumbai will be a big hub. Kolkata already is. Between Bangalore and Hyderabad, there will be big major hubs in the south. So once you are developing this kind of civil aviation scenario, it stands to reason that you don't have to go to Europe or some other place. You look at the history of countries like China. I think one of you already said why China succeeded in developing it, why Ireland succeeded. It is all folklore now. But I have no doubt that with the ecosystem that has been put in place and what Mr. Injeti and they are doing in Gujarat, we will be on par with other countries in the world to serve a sector which is a critical driver of growth. Now, all these things have been listed. I'm not going to repeat them. 10 out of 15 consecutive years, tax holidays to IFSC-based leasing units, income on disposal of aircraft by aircraft leasing units, not taxable, income earned by non-resident lessor on leasing aircraft to IFSC-based lessee, not taxable, non-applicability of MAT provisions under income tax law, stamp duty exemption. When I look at this, and in order to study this, I compare this with what other countries are doing. And that one message that comes through, we are perhaps comparable. In some respects, as Vandana said, maybe we have gone a little further. But the most important defining characteristic is that we are not averse to learning and to tweaking the system further to attract and to ensure that aircraft leasing becomes not only a center for India and the region, but perhaps, and I was very happy with what Mr. Injeti said, that when we mainstream ourselves, we have to move from consumers to producers of international financial services. I think this is what the game is about. This is what Atmanirbharta is about. Again, I'm sorry, I'm now talking like an old man, going back to personal experiences. When the first World Summit of Information Societies took place, and I was ambassador in Geneva, and the second one, this is what all about internet and all these things are about. I used to lament that India has got so much potential, but our internet penetration was only 17%. Today, in a population of 134 billion, I think the penetration would be close to the population or slightly short. If you look at the use of smartphones close, I had a meeting with my colleague Piyush Ji the other day. I said, you know, from a country which had 2 mobile phone producers, we now are one of the major producers. And it's not long before that kind of smartphone that we can make will be marketed all over the world with a Make in India stamp on it. But I think today, when we are talking about financial services and particularly aircraft leasing, we are here. I like the spirit with which Vandana summed up her presentation. I think she'll make a longer one during the panel discussion. But thank you very much, Finance Minister. Thank you very much for these budgetary announcements. But more than that, we count on you that when we navigate our way forward, we always have a strong ally to push forward. And I assure you, with the other stakeholders, you will find that as we go along in the coming years, this will not only be mainstream business. We are not only moving from consumers and service providers, but we will also be major producers and exporters. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. So it's my pleasure and my privilege to welcome and to invite the Honorable Minister of Finance, Madam Nirmala Sitharamanji. She has been, in a sense, our partner in this in many, many more ways than one. I can share that, ma'am, we used to really know that the tax reform will happen just because you're there, and we would see it through. So from a very grateful compatriot across in Ministry of Civil Aviation, it's my great pleasure to welcome you, ma'am. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be here today attending the India Aircraft Leasing Summit. My very active and dynamic colleague, Hardeep Singh Puri, Secretary Pradeep Singh Karola, JP Srinivas, and Vandana Agarwal. Also, I understand Committee Chairman Uday Shankar is around, the stakeholders, and all those interested in civil aviation. I'd like to thank the organizers for putting together such a major event and seeing the participation of all the stakeholders, both from India and also around the world, in such a major summit. This summit, I would think, sets a new benchmark for aviation industry stakeholders, in that they are able to converge and also to deliberate on very crucial aspect of aircraft leasing business. I would think it marks a very important day in India's aviation history to be able to formally launch the aircraft leasing business from the GIFT City, which is the International Financial Services Center in Gujarat that India is actively engaged in building as a robust offshore location but onshore. So IFSC actually has the blend of what most world recognize as offshore centers, which seem to have all kinds of great things going on about there, but on an onshore platform, which is in the GIFT City. It gives me personally immense satisfaction that I had the opportunity by now 3 times in 3 different announcements, but all 3 budgetary announcements, to give such packages, both direct and indirect taxation and regulatory related facility through the budgetary announcements of 1920 budget announcement, again 2021 and now 21-22 also, to give traction to the international financial services sector at Leasing. And even as we were building the IFSC to become a very vibrant global financial hub with all the necessary attractive features that an offshore financial services center would offer, I as I said, but I'm repeating, being around onshore, being within India, the IFC is present physically on Indian soil, and I guess because of inherent cost-effective features and run more efficiently with all technology so required, we have rapidly built on the IFSC. Now, the reason why I elaborate on this rapid building of IFSC is alongside much less notice was a rapid building up on this aircraft leasing business. I would use it as an example to show how in a federal system, where center and states will have to work together, where various different departments of government of India will have to work together, an idea which came up for discussion, say not over 3 years, only about 2.5 years, has rapidly come traction, developed by all the stakeholders, government departments in the union government, today happening. So this is the kind of new India we're talking, even post or immediately post the pandemic. Rapid coordination among departments, working together with the state government, and as a result you find that ideas mature quickly, and today we are launching something which will be the third in the world, given the scope of the business of air travel in India, given the scope of the list of orders we have pending for supply of aircrafts. And therefore, I would think this initiative, both of the International Financial Services Center, the IFSC in Big City, and also the aircraft leasing business itself, will require aggressive participation from lessors and also from the Indian and global airlines. And I think therefore, I urge the Indian and global airlines to come and participate in this important endeavor of Government of India in the GIFT City. I am also happy to know that the leasing entities are coming forward to set up aircraft leasing business at the GIFT City, and that demonstrates actually the confidence of the industry on the steps taken by Government of India to bring aircraft leasing business onshore from offshore locations. I would go immediately the idea that most of these aircraft leasing companies come over to India and set up here. I suppose most of the things which need to be said have been said. The Indian aspirations, particularly at this time when the stimulus package is being given, when emphasis is being given for every sector's development as is the need, according to the sector, measures are being taken at a rapid pace. This aircraft leasing business probably will lead the way to show other sectors also how when IAS time has come, it will definitely catch the momentum to lead it all from the front. I wish the aircraft leasing business in India all the very best, and we at the Finance Ministry are always here to work side by side with the Civil Aviation Ministry and also the big city. So, wishing you all the very best and thanking you for giving me an opportunity to be with you all today.
Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharamanji, thank you so much for so comprehensively listing out and detailing the business case for why you believe the aircraft leasing industry in India is poised for takeoff. Thank you very much for joining us here and for explaining the case and the arguments of the Indian government to all the stakeholders present. I believe this will assure investors who are looking at this opportunity and give them a sense of clarity on the road ahead. Many thanks to the Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Puri, for putting together this event and bringing all these participants together, and for once again very comprehensively laying out the roadmap of what we should expect as far as the growth for the aviation sector over the next few years. Thank you very much to the Secretary of the Ministry of Civil Aviation, Mr. Kairola, for joining us here this afternoon. Thank you to Mr. Injeti Srinivas, the Chairperson of the International Financial Services Centres Authority, and thank you very much to Remy Milad, the Chairman of Airbus, the President and MD of Airbus in India. We look forward to your continued contribution here to the Indian aviation story. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who may have joined us online on television, this is being broadcast across various platforms. A very quick snapshot of what has happened on the regulatory front, what has happened on the taxation front, and what has happened on ensuring that this becomes a reality, that the leasing business in India becomes a reality, not just for Indian aviation, but for the world. As was very clearly articulated here by the Finance Minister as well as the Aviation Minister, several, in their words, game-changing decisions have been taken by the government, whether that has to do with tax-related relief, tax incentives, or it is to do with the kind of notifications that have made this more viable from a gift city perspective, and that they believe is likely to bring this whole piece together, bring this whole story together. We will shortly hear from other panelists, other stakeholders on what they believe the opportunity holds, and if there are any further disabilities, disadvantages that require redressal, because as the Civil Aviation Minister pointed out, the Ministry is open to feedback, open to suggestions. So if anyone has any specific areas that they would like the government to focus more on, we'd be happy to take those on board. We of course have stakeholders representing different interests, from the airline business, from the OEMs, from banks, and of course the government. So without further ado, thank you very much to my panel for joining us here this afternoon before I get the next set of speakers on board, but appreciate your time and we wish you all the very best of luck. Thank you very much. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Let me just Ladies and gentlemen who are standing, may I please once again request all of you to sit down. I know that many of the panelists have gone to see off the dignitaries. It's but natural. Alok, may I request you to come on? Rajesh Bhoot, Joint Secretary, CBDT, he should be here. He had indicated. Or is he online? Dipesh Shah, he's here. He's I think gone to see Mr. Srinivasov. Actually, you've got just two people on the board. Could this mic be switched on, please? Mic nahi kaam kar raha. I think it's that. Okay. Anyway, now I'm here. So, since we were constrained for time, and Secretary had to rush through his announcements, there are two very important announcements that he left the task to me to do, and I'm very happy to do that. The National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, NIIF, which is a collaborative investment platform anchored by the Government of India for international and Indian institutional investors. It has a focus on infrastructure and private equity sectors. It has indicated a very strong interest in aviation businesses, including aircraft leasing from IFSC Gift City. So I would urge all of you to be in touch with NIIF for the much needed money. Secondly, State Bank of India, which is represented also here by the Managing Director, which is an Indian multinational public sector bank, is keen to be an active participant in the aircraft leasing business at Gift City IFSC. We also have our insurance companies coming forth, and it's again my pleasure to announce that ICICI Lombard has also shown serious interest in growing the business from Gift City and will work with other industry players, including aviation, to develop risk management solutions. So without much ado, I'm going to let Shireen take over in this matter. Thank you, Shireen. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Agarwal. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us here on what is going to be a hybrid session. We have some of our panelists right here live on the dais and many others who are joining us online. We live in COVID times still, even though if one looks around this room, one would imagine that the pandemic is over. It's not, so we still have a few people joining us online, but we hope to make it as interactive as possible. We're going to kick things off by picking up on where the ministers left the conversation, which is to say that many measures have been taken by the Civil Aviation Ministry, by the Finance Ministry to ensure that India becomes an attractive leasing hub, that it becomes a destination where people will feel comfortable doing business and it becomes a viable business proposition. Many of the changes, both on the tax front and the regulation front, have been listed out. You heard about the kind of tax incentives that have been given. So let me straight away go across to people on the panel to get their understanding of what they make of the changes, and more importantly, what they believe the opportunity looks like. To quote Ms. Agarwal, she said, the mood is there, the market is right, the timing is now right as well to make this story a reality. So let me go across to Ashish Sonawala, the Senior Vice President and Regional Manager APAC at GCAS. Ashish, many thanks for joining us. Unfortunate that you couldn't be here with us in person, but it's good to have you join us online. In terms of the measures that have already been taken by the government, the minister believes that these are game-changing measures, and this makes India, if not as competitive, perhaps in some respects even more competitive than global destinations. How are you looking at the changes that have been brought in? What does the regulatory, the tax structure in India look like to you at this point in time? Do you believe that enough is in play now to ensure that the leasing hub aspiration is a reality?
It's very evident from all commentaries earlier that India is taking this focus as a very important step forward. And at the time when we were contacted a while back, we at GCAS had a very open dialogue with the regulators and all the various stakeholders who are technical and startups, including technology. We shared with them a lot of ideas that we thought were relevant to what makes aviation a global hub. And if we could add more value in the. But just to kind of set context a little bit, GCAS is a global aviation player. As you know that, as mentioned earlier, an aircraft is a very mobile asset. It moves from one aircraft to airline to another airline, and one piece to another piece. And there's no shelf life for any one jurisdiction. Also, the ownership of the aircraft changes from time to time, and that's we get money. So, a global player like us, who has got 1,500 aircraft in its portfolio that operates in 75 different countries, with 200 different customers, we have to think of a global platform and we think about scale. I also have mentioned in what countries are big, it has to have a requirement where an aircraft can, without undue complication, move from one list to another, no issues as far as taxation goes, and make it as seamless and frictionless as possible, so that the aircraft will transition and deliver and re-deliver easily. And the fourth aspect is what we talked about earlier was access to global capital. That is important for financiers, important for airlines who are looking for finance space, they have access to global capital. So those are some of the things that we put forward to the regulators in the discussions we had. Specifically for India, GCAS has been doing this since 1993 for all the airlines. We started when the food industry was very small and we just opened up. Leasing was a very nascent play at that time, but we went through the journey with the airlines, through startups, through LCCs, food service carriers, government airlines, private airlines. We have worked with them throughout these 30 years, and we continue to have a bullish view on it. And if the big city airline, we will very open-minded and have a frank discussion with them as to how we get this to a more positive and probably part of it.
Well, that's good to hear, Ashish, that you're bullish on India and continue to be bullish on India and happy to engage with various stakeholders to take this conversation forward. But if I could just address the scale issue that you spoke of, because you said that that is one of the crucial aspects that make it viable for someone to consider the leasing possibility. You know, we heard from the minister saying that, look, we're headed to 2,000 aircraft in a short period of time. We're already at 1,000, headed to 1,200 in the near term. So from a scale perspective, do you believe that the opportunity today presents itself in a much more viable way?
Yes, absolutely. India is definitely a very high market ratio. The order book by itself speaks by itself in a way that, we understand what the needs of the public are. The potential to fly is still small and upside is tremendous. All the figures of COVID rates are not vehicles. Again, for growth, we look at the global platform, what is our single country focus. Obviously, India is one of us, and we have a lot of exposure already, and we continue to grow that. And scale is more global sector, not just single.
Right. Let me bring one of the airlines into the conversation. And since we're talking about order books and strong balance sheets, both essential to be able to get this off the ground. Ronojoy Datta, Chief Executive Officer at Indigo, with us. Mr. Datta, many thanks for joining us here on this panel. The aspiration of ensuring that India becomes a relevant player and hopefully in the future a leader in this market. Do you believe that the pieces are now in place, the timing is right for that to happen?
Let me make a couple of introductory remarks. I would like to applaud the government for finding and identifying this opportunity in the overall aviation space of leasing MROs, engine manufacturing, and really seizing the opportunity with a well-coordinated plan. I think that's really good leadership. So I applaud them for that. And you talked about opportunity. And Sri Hardeep Singh Puri talked about the aircraft, he's more optimistic than Mr. Corolla. And let me say, I'm more optimistic than both.
What's your number?
Only 7% of Indians are less fly. Our middle income is growing in leaps and bounds. And we have a geography which is very hard to traverse in India. So yes, there's lots and lots of opportunity. And as airlines grow, I think the ecosystem around them will grow as well. So it's good that the government has identified this early. It's good that they're putting a coordinated plan in action. And I'm actually optimistic and confident it will work.
Okay, you're confident that it will work, but are you going to, and you believe that the ecosystem is going to come into play, and of course you believe the demand is got significant headroom for growth from here. So do you believe that, or give me a timeline for when you believe that we are likely to see leasing taking off, and what role you're going to play in that?
The timeline for it, of course, will depend a lot on the lesson. The airline is right. I would observe that it's hard to get established players to say, close shop in Dublin and move to City. That's going to be a hard sell. But there are lots of new players. We're not yet at that. And it was marketing campaign, you want to meet us. I think it's not. As far as the airline is concerned, we have ordered a lot of things. I think we ordered too few. We probably keep ordering more. So the best thing that we can do, you talk about MROs, leasing, all of that. There has to be enough fish in the water for the fishermen to be able to be fun. And the best thing we do can do that, keep ordering more.
And you promised to do much more of that. But since you said that it's going to be a hard sell to get the lessors to move to Gift City, let me give the opportunity to Mr. Dipesh Shah to make his pitch here to people who are listening. Mr. Shah, this is your moment. Do the hard sale.
I think in the opening inaugural, two very important factors came out. I'm not on the hard sell right now, but let me explain two very important points which came out. we as a country create such a large demand, and on a platter that demand goes to other financial centers which are all serving India sitting there. So what we are doing is we are exporting business, we are exporting jobs to those financial centers without taking the whole value chain benefit in our own country. I think that was the starting point when I was a member of the report which was being prepared by under the chairperson Vandana Agarwal. The first point we started was, why can't this be done in India? When you go out and meet people in Dubai, in Dublin, in Singapore, half of the time we end up meeting Indians, and 50% of that are Gujaratis, which are in financial services, sitting there at hard selling Ireland to Indigo.
That's what you're betting on, is it?
And they are telling them, why don't you hire and take services from our locations? I think time has come for India to step up and say, if we can build other financial centers on the strength of our own business, why can't we in India, if we put all the efforts together, as was visible, that whether Ministry of Revenue, CBDT is here, Honorable Finance Minister was here, Honorable Civil Aviation Minister was here, the whole ministry is putting all efforts together with all the stakeholders. I don't see that you need a hard selling. You just need the ecosystem and the support of the right players, which would help people to step in. And on all the journey, wherever you find that there are gaps, where there are lapses, I think this is the government and this is the authority which is open to hear and resolve all the issues which you foresee in the journey. And believe me, the slide which we saw from 8.72 million to 3.06 might be an Excel number for someone, but it was a lot of efforts behind those 5 million and making it par with the island or other financial centers. It has never been easy for any government to put everyone on the same job and get the things done. We feel that this is the time has come for India to step into the new game of international financial services and onshore the offshore financial services, and stop going to those financial centers and sell our products through those financial centers. Why can't we sell our own products to our own financial centers?
Okay, so no hard sell needed. You believe that you're on the cusp of making that a reality. Alok Anand, the Chairman and CEO of Acumen Aviation. Alok, the point being made there by Mr. Shah is that why can't India do it? And that he believes that now the environment, the ecosystem is in place for India to actually be able to do it. The Civil Aviation Secretary alluded to the fact that you have already made a first step as far as GIFT City is concerned. Take us through that and why you believe that that's a viable proposition for you.
Well, thank you, Shireen. Well, as far as Acumen is concerned, I totally second what my colleague Dipesh here is saying, what Mr. Datta has just alluded to. I'm very, very optimistic about prospects in India and the region in general. And I think pretty much I'm in the best position to say that we are taking steps already in that direction. So, exactly, we've already done that actually. As we speak, we are in the process. Dipesh is well aware. So as far as Acumen is concerned, by the way, I'm a Punjabi, not a Gujarati. That is the only challenge I see right now. But apart from that, what I see happening is that I think the time is right for India to step onto the world stage in terms of aviation. For far too long, we have been consumers. Nothing wrong with that, it's an international market. I'm not in favor of protectionism, but I'm in favor of growing the pie. So as far as I'm concerned, India's time is now, and the changes which have happened in aviation, not just in leasing, but overall MRO and airline and other tax structurings which have taken place, they are just unprecedented to what I have seen in last more than 2 decades now. And I think this is the reason Acumen and Acumen's shareholders and board, it was an easy decision for us that this makes sense. We can bring in the expertise we have gained internationally, and the team we have here, we can leverage it very well in favor of a platform which can offer leasing solutions locally in India.
Well, that's good to hear, and congratulations
Thank
on
you.
taking those first steps. Let me bring Francois Colette, the head of aircraft investors at Airbus and co-chair of the Aviation Working Group, into the conversation as well. Francois, many thanks for joining us here on this special conversation. Everyone on this panel is talking about the opportunity that India offers, and the firm belief or the unanimous belief now seems to be that all pieces have fallen into place to ensure that this is an opportunity not just for Indian aviation companies like the ones that Ronojoy Datta heads, but also for global airlines. How are you looking at the India story today, Francois?
The opportunity to speak, the conference. I think, I want to come back on the first on the opportunity and sharing the fact that it's a great opportunity because it has contracted certain aircraft need to be delivered in 5 years. So, and 70% of the aircraft will be in use. So that means it's a 50% opportunity that's being constructed and delivered. So I think the fact that we see this progress with a new tax incentive, we know it's going to make the leasing product more competitive for airlines. It's going to benefit the sector, so we think it's very, very promising and very positive. And I think the opportunity is to create a new financial ecosystem, mixing foreign investors and Indian financial markets. So that's also very positive. Now I think, and coming back to what some of the panelists have said, I see that as a real base for actually more. So I think it's not just looking at domestic airlines, but as you know, leasing is an international business. It's by definition cross border. So if you want to be global, it's not just about bringing foreign vessels into India and installation from India for these aircraft in India, but also I think it's all about potentially creating a new Indian-based vessel, and for this vessel to actually offer its product, leasing product outside of India, and create that community. And I think so. There still have a few challenges that need to be overcome to do this. I think it deals with the fact that efficiency is critical on cross-border matters. And that deals with what is called double tax avoidance agreements. So I think the next step is beyond looking at the tax efficiency within India. It's to be looking at improving on, I think there's about 80 plus of these double tax avoidance agreements, and to be improved at India. From India, resources can actually reach out to the world and find clients even outside of India. I think that's the great opportunity that this initiative is creating as a base. I think it needs to go further because I think India could participate in the global player.
Well, thank you very much.
These are awards of the opportunity and
That's an important point that you make in terms of the foundation having been laid, but the areas of further movement, especially on the DTA. So let me get the representative from the CBDT to comment on that. Mr. Booth, thanks very much. To the point that Mr. Shah made, that very often it's underappreciated how you've been able to deal with the disability or the disadvantage and make India as competitive as peers like Ireland, etc. But to the point that was being made there by Francois, that this has to be seamless, it has to be frictionless because this involves cross-border transactions. On the DTA front, is that something that you are looking at this point in time? What should we expect?
Thank you. At the outset, I will say that the policy of the government in recent year is to have the lower taxation and not to allow any exemptions or deduction. But for promoting Gift City and bringing the business to Gift City, the government has given very many exemptions. So, for the aircraft leasing, the Finance Bill 2021, this proposes that any payment of royalty to the non-resident will be exempt for aircraft leasing. So, it is mentioned, it will be incorporated in the Income Tax Act, and once the Income Tax Act exempts something, so that DTA will be subservient to the Income Tax Act only, and this payment to the non-resident will be exempt, and any aircraft leasing unit which will be set up in the gift city, if they make any payment to the non-resident for leasing of aircraft, no TDS will be deducted, no DTA will be deducted, because this has been incorporated in the Act itself. And regarding the income of the unit itself, there is a provision, proposed provisions which give the tax holiday to the unit. So unit will not pay tax. The person who is getting the lease rental, he will not pay any tax. And moreover, this government has brought the optional scheme that if you don't take the exemption deduction, then there is a lower rate. But for the gift city, there is one exemption there, that it will not be liable for MAT also. So there is no tax incidence, and this has been the endeavor of the government to make the gift city as tax efficient as any center in the world. And so any apprehension on this ground is not on the basis of any facts and figures. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, sir, for making it clear that, the government has done what it could to ensure that GIFT City is in fact an attractive destination. So many of those changes on the tax front have been brought in. But let me bring the airlines back into the conversation, and let me get Mr. Vinod Hejmadi, the Director of Finance at Air India, into the conversation, along with Sunil Bhaskar and the CEO and MD of AirAsia. Mr. Hejmadi, to you first, in terms of the value proposition that everyone is talking about, in comparison to a lessor in India versus a lessor globally, what is it that airlines will be looking for?
Thank you, Jimmy. What we first would like to say, we never had the opportunity to have a lease in India. We are always to a front, so we are very excited that we can now have a lease in India. So obviously, we have banking like PSU banks, like State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, etc., who have their offshore offices and they're doing this kind of lease business from their offshore offices. They can do it in India. What we are looking for is that, India was always considered a market where they had this experience of not able to repossess aircraft. The lot of progress has been done on that side. So I believe if we have a leasing company in India and a restaurant in India, the cost of credit and the cost of capital will come down, and that will get reflected in the lease rate. So the lease rate that we are being charged, this will have an effect. I know that there are a lot of tax incentives that will be offered, maybe to make it par with the Irish or with the leases. Indian carriers are not the only ones who have to participate, because I think the minister was talking about two aircraft. But as Chancellor said, if we consider leases from the global and make cross border, then this number could be 5 minutes also. So we have to make. I agree with Chancellor that we have to have some more tax treaties. The EPA has to be reworded, because whatever taxation vehicle is for the Indian entity. But if you want to have business with foreign airlines leasing for India, then maybe the tax treaties will have to take a look. So the size will also matter in that, as Ashish started in the beginning said, that it is size factor, because and that's where when there is a scale, then we will get the benefit in the form of values. So we are all excited about this. If Indian carriers can make payments in Indian rupees, we will wait for it for first step. So that would be another advantage that we can have. But I'm sure we will how that could come for the leasing companies that they can allow Indian carriers to pay in Indian rupees. How they will hedge their risk, that would be figured out along with the IT sector. And so if the solution is found to that, it should be really effective.
Well, I think we do have somebody from the banking sector joining us on the next panel. We'll try and get that answered. But Dipesh, do you want to just come in on the point that was being made there by Vinod?
Yeah, I think when we started, the title of the report always said Rupee Raftar, and it was always debated, how to bring the rupee financing in the whole ecosystem, because that's what the lessor has always been saying. What as an IFFC authority we have done is we have come out with a banking regulation which now allows the banks set up in the IFFC to even do INR ECB. So a leasing entity in an IFFC would be able to get INR ECB in an Indian rupees. And we also, in the May 2020, the Honorable Finance Minister permitted the flag of the INR USD derivatives in the IFFC. So now you can do OTC hedging and you can do exchange traded derivatives, INR USD and other currency at IFFC itself. So you can do both. You have a INR ECB, you would be able to hedge your currency risk in the zone itself. And to add to that, you have an insurance company sitting there which will provide dollar insurance and the related products required for this financing. And most importantly, we have ECGC, the Export Credit Guarantee Corporation, part of the ecosystem, which can actually end up into securing a lot of payments to the lessors when they have a fear on the airline. So all this is part of the ecosystem, which is now only for the players to come forward, as Alok is doing, as Viman is doing, as Jet Set Go is doing. The players has to come forward and start believing that this is happening. One or two deals will make it happen for everyone.
So how much Raftar have we seen so far?
Almost 10 announcement is what Ministry has managed today. That means
not bad for 7 days.
Not bad for 7 days.
Not bad for 7 days.
This came out on the regulation on 19th. Framework came on 19th February. On 26th, you have 10 people coming forward to do the deals at the zone.
Well, that's good to hear. Let me ask Sunil Bhaskaran to join in as well. Sunil, you've heard what some of the other panelists have had to say. Your take on what you believe are the opportunities and perhaps some of the constraints that require being addressed. Sunil, are you with us? Yes, that is a problem. Sunil, if you could unmute yourself, that would help.
Can we hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So, thanks for having me on this panel, and just to continue to find to the problem that my Dipesh. I think the biggest advantage for the airline, everything else being equal, to have a lesser amount of accuracy, but we will take the current risk out, and given that this will be anywhere up to 50% of the only cost of the airline, I think that's a significant risk that the airline doesn't need to address and the entire ecosystem will address. The second point, and to again mention this, I think it is a game-changing set of rules which have been announced. Because till now, as again, mentioned, we didn't have the opportunity of having that out of India offering us leasing services. I think this needs to do with tax, this needs to do with costs, this needs to do with some of the accountancy rules have been addressed, and I think IFC will make that easier. But there is a whole ecosystem which needs to get developed. And actually, it gives us a lot of hope to tell the minister say that while some of these initiatives have happened, we are willing to learn and invest and navigate through what comes in. And I think that's what is very important for us to grow the entire ecosystem. If I was to compare this with manufacturing setup that we are trying to get in, maybe for mobile manufacturing, if I started with the SME first, then start with some of the phone manufacturing, and then subsequently the entire ancillary ecosystem comes, when you can really start, the entire manufacturing for the world, which is exactly what we're talking about. Developing this entire airline leasing ecosystem in India, which will have the advantage of having a large local demand, and which is one reason that many countries which are trying to follow Ireland into making this happen have not succeeded, as much as China has, because China has its own local demand. India has that local demand today, and India has that local demand coming up over the years. So So that would be the base on which this can be built for the rest of the world. So I think I'm very excited to see the kind of development. I think Motherland and Team was very hard over the last 2 years to make it happen. But now some of these costs and the rules and the policy part have been put in place, but we have to work patiently together to build the ecosystem.
Yes, and I guess it would be important that there is alignment across all stakeholders to ensure that that happens. But let me get Ronojoy back into the conversation. And you know, since you believe that there is an underestimation of the kind of demand that you foresee in the market, to the ecosystem point that was being made by people on the panel, including Sunil just a moment ago, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about the leasing hub aspiration, but what about the MRO aspiration, Ronojoy? Because that is something that we've spoken of for many, many years now, and I've tracked civil aviation for a long time. Do you believe that finally, you know, we're likely to see that take off in light of the changes that have been brought in?
And it plays to our natural advantage. India has a huge pool of engineers. We are relatively low cost. We are technically very efficient. And we are large fleet of airplanes. So yes, it's a very natural market, and it's surprisingly speaking pure against the tax, which you could certainly know. But India really can be the MRO factor of the world, because they are actually all around in Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. But I believe we can be more cost efficient, and quality could be better as well. So MRO really is huge.
Well, it's a huge opportunity, you know, and you said that we've had this aspiration to be the MRO capital of the world for a long time now. Do you believe that with the changes that have been made, we're closer to this being realized, or do you believe that there are still some deterrents?
The issue really was about taxes, and that made us confirmation. Individually to send planes to Sri Lanka for MRO. When you could have just send it to Air Max or someone in Mexico. And the fact is the high taxes that has now been online. And as I said, the amount of advantages that we have, because it is a very labor intensive industry, and that's where our advantage lies. So yes, the MRO is a huge opportunity. And from India's perspective, it's a blue collar, high employment, which is why we should pursue very aggressively.
And that seems to be part of the objective of the government as well. But let me get Francois and Ashish back into the conversation. And Ashish, I'll start by asking you, on the back of some of the comments that have come in here from the policymakers, from you know, the people in the tax department, suggesting that they are willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that cross-border challenges will be seamless, that there will be no friction, and if there is any pain that requires to be addressed, that will be addressed. If I could ask you to leave us with you know, 2 or 3 specific issues that you believe still require some work to ensure that we actually move in the direction that we've started on.
Well, I think some of the conversations we had with the question is really very open. Very open comments, and others have been informative and very satisfied in the interaction. This is a very open place to business. We are very critical of us. I don't have any specific comments to say that this is I think it's local tax. That is very early. Local tax, local financial instruments. We need to play a bigger role here. Either it is being for the mobility investing in there's a local switch for local banks and not very far with growth to come into a really active role in this initiative. And that really capital needs to do it. The source standards from business often here, the end of the day, need local access to capital and from local
Yeah, access to capital will have to be addressed, and perhaps we'll hear what Sujoy and others have to say on the next panel that we will start shortly. Francois, any specifics from global experiences, from the global learning that you believe the India playbook needs to adopt?
Yeah, thanks. I get with my addition what you have on here. I think one of the critical things as well is that as a jurisdiction, India, we need to not just continue to make full implementation of the ICANN convention, as a new basic convention that ensure that in case of default, lenders, creditors can be processed for aircraft with minimum friction. But I think it's also very important to ensure compliance with the Cape Town Convention treaty over time. And I think that's going to be critical because that's a key factor in maintaining the capital flow into the leasing sector. In many countries, treaty has been ratified and is implemented. But I think now overall around the world, we try to make sure that there is compliance with the treaty. And I think India, as sign as being a global place of business and developing the leasing sector, I think that's something that needs to be fully endorsed and complied with, so that basically show the way to the other countries on that. So I think that's a key thing as well that needs to be followed.
Yes, joining the treaty is of course important, but is repossession, challenges to repossession a big fear at this point in time? Because if one were to look at the experience with the unfortunate incident that happened with an airline that went bust a short while ago, repossession wasn't a challenge. So is that an overstated fear while doing business in India today?
I think and you always have frictions here and there, and so I think the sales and investors always, unfortunately, sometimes focus on I would say, details and the stories they have, and that's pretty important for the industry to make sure that there's no friction at all, and it's seamless, and all authorities endorse and want full compliance with the treaty. So I think that's a very important point. And again, to make sure that capital will flow and to the benefit of the airlines and to the benefit of the sector, and again to the leasing sector. I think that's critical.
Yes, that is critical. Let me get you in for your final comments on what you believe the road ahead needs to look like and what the playbook should be. Go ahead, Vinod.
Yeah, actually, I think just taking off on what you just discussed about that repossessing of aircraft. I feel that, I think a few years back, the lessors had a bad experience. The confidence has come back in the recent incident of what happened a year ago. The lessors really going to take back the repossess the aircraft swiftly. So I think it's a confidence building measure. And so obviously the lessors have to have confidence in these regulatory frameworks where they should expect the DGCA to allow the aircraft to be flown back. So the confidence is so you need to have what are the instances where actually there's a positive feedback, and then as Chancellor said, they go by what local news say and local stories say. So the story is changing, and that is the lessors feel confidence will grow. On the MRO side, I think India subsidiary brought about the finance MROs in Nagpur. It's a Boeing built MRO with the brand facility. So I guess the most steps taken by the government to build the MRO industry is very vital, because when you think of making a leasing hub in the country, you need to have an MRO service also, which is hand in hand. One last point which I would like to say that, I think the level of confidence level for the legal framework within the country is good enough. We should look at getting swift justice, and maybe the case of convention, I think there's some ratification of legislation which has to be passed, otherwise India is ready for it. So that's one bit of legislation which has to go through. But all these things will bring the confidence back, and I'm sure that not only the Indian carriers want people forward to leaving from India, from GIFT City, but I think very soon foreign carriers will also look to look at GIFT City and alternate destinations to Ireland.
Well, that is certainly music to Dipesh's ears. He's beaming listening to what you have to say, Vinod. So Dipesh, let me get you to leave us with what we should expect in terms of the next steps, the confidence building measures that are going to come in from GIFT City to invite interest.
I think the steps which have already been taken in a short span from 1st October, that the authority got all the powers of all the four regulators to the February 2021. Stepwise, we are trying to resolve all the issues and also be very open-minded, more outward-looking in terms of what is happening in the other financial centers and how do we enable. The moment you start seeing it from a perspective that we are an outward-looking, we want to match to the best of the regulatory practices followed globally, I think things start putting in place, and that's what we've seen in the aircraft leasing, the framework which we debated. We initially debated why can't it be a very hard-coded regulation which ensures that you have to bring in minimum capital, liquidity, prudential norms and all. And when we observed Ireland, when we observed Singapore, Hong Kong, what we found was there was no regulatory hard-coded framework which ensured that a lot of freedom were given to the lessor to come in and do the business in the more flexible way. And I think that's the more approach that as an authority we have adopted. We done for aircraft leasing, we are done for international bullion exchange now. We have come out with a regulation which is more outward looking. We are doing for global in-house center. You come to India and saw the global market, a regime which is matching to what has been done in Philippines recently. So we match the regulation, what was done there. In a way, we are trying to benchmark to the best of the practices followed, and at the same time, we keep a focus on the homegrown demand. Why can't we serve our own demand through our own financial center? So that's how we are trying to match the whole.
Mr. Booth, have you done enough, or do you believe there's room for a little bit more?
As far as the income tax is concerned, I think that whatever concession has been announced in the budget, that makes the Indian IFSC center at par with the global hubs. And I think that whatever needs to be done under the Income Tax Act has already been proposed, and once the act is enacted, this will become applicable from the 1st April. And all I can say that now the Indian center is at par with the global as far as the taxation is concerned. So a person cannot say that by coming to India I am having some kind of disadvantage as compared to the global centers.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, gentlemen, thank you for sharing your insights on what you believe the opportunity holds, and more importantly, what each one of you individually or specifically through your companies is looking to do. As I pointed out, unequivocal, unanimous view coming in that the opportunity is large and this is the opportunity for us to lose. So no time can be wasted. The regulatory and the tax pieces have been put in place. It's now a question of going out there and making it happen. Mr. Booth, Dipesh Shah, Sunil Bhaskaran, Vinod Hejmadi, Ronojoy Datta, Alok Anand, Francois Colette and Ashish Sonawala. Many thanks for joining us here on this special conversation on making India an international leasing hub. Thank you very much for your time. We'll take a break, but there's another very exciting conversation lined up. So stay on with us. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment. Okay.
Sitting order? No, they'll put the dates, just tell them who you are. So it's also become a low cost. You can so I'll be probably. Do you mind next week? Sir, would you like to sit here? Please. I always want to. Because he's the dominant player. That's how I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel yeah.
Where are these gentlemen? Sorry.
Whatever it is, it's a real struggle. I know, like industry in India.
Negative. That's right. Okay, we're going to get started. Taking off from the previous conversation where we talked about the structural reforms that have been put in place to ensure that India does realize its potential of becoming a leasing hub, we now move to talking about the specific advantages and the economics of aircraft leasing, both as far as civil aviation is concerned and the defense opportunity. I have with me a next set of great panelists joining me on the dais. B.L. Kantarao, the Additional Secretary and Director General Acquisition at the Ministry of Defense. Also with us, Salil Gupte, the President of Boeing. Vishok Mansingh, the CEO of Viman Aero Services, also with us here in person, Mr. Ajay Singh, the CEO of SpiceJet. Let me also welcome Ashwini Tiwari, the Managing Director, International Banking at SBI. He's, of course, joining us online, as is Sujoy Bose, the MD and CEO of the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund. Oh, sorry, my apologies, Mr. Tiwari. It's a little
little confusing with this online-offline setup. But thank you to each of our panelists for joining us here today. Let me kickstart with you, Mr. Singh, since you're right at the head of the table, and taking forward the conversation that we had previously on the structural reforms that have been put in place, and now to talk about the economics of leasing out of India. You've already got a smile on your face. I don't know what that implies. So take me through the business case and why you believe it makes sense.
Look, firstly, I really want to congratulate the government of India because they've come up with significant initiatives in the civil aviation sector, the first of which was really Udan, and then the work which was done on the MRO sector. And on leasing of aircraft, we've said for years now that if India is to buy these large number of aircraft, it makes little sense that we keep funding them from outside India, because when airlines fund from outside India, of course, they're exposed to foreign exchange risk. And it's a business that India should have a part of. China has done it extremely effectively. We've actually been leasing aircraft from Chinese lessors. And shame on us that we haven't been able to develop this so far. The tax structure, of course, was extremely unfriendly, couldn't be done before. The fact that Civil Aviation Ministry and Finance have worked together to make this real, I think great credit to them, and we congratulate them. But in India, what tends to happen is that sometimes we have great policy and great intent. It's the execution where we suffer. So we at SpiceJet, we will fully support what the government of India has done, as we have supported each and every one of their initiatives. When they came with Udan, SpiceJet was the first airline in Udan. When they, we were the only airline in Udan in the first round. When changes were made to the MRO policy, SpiceJet set up the first MRO airline, setting up an MRO in the country. And now with this particular exciting project, of course, we will fully support them. Not only will we try and work with the lessors who are setting up shop in the gift city, and try and see if we can start by funding, we've said today, seaplanes, because that's a small project. We will try and fund it so that we can iron out some of the issues that may exist before actually contemplating setting up our own leasing entity. If it works well, we are happy to go and set up our own leasing entity in the gift city. It really is an idea whose time has come, but we must implement it well. We complicate things in this country. We need to keep them simple. We need to see how we can be competitive, and we need to be strategic about it and really tough about it. That that we don't give in to our tendency to over-regulate, our tendency to over-complicate. If we can do this right, massive business opportunity for India, and I hope we can do it well. There's a lot of concern about whether we have the expertise. China had the same issue, right? I mean, they didn't have the expertise to do this. Their banks wanted to finance, but they didn't have the expertise. So they went and actually bought leasing companies, global leasing companies, the asset managers. They just went and bought out the asset managers, and then today you see so many of the asset managers are actually owned by these Chinese banks. And we can follow with the people like Mr. Tiwari here, State Bank of India, the big, strong banks we have flushed with liquidity, and aviation and aircraft are fantastic assets. You can repossess them, you can replace them, the value doesn't deteriorate. So it's one of those great asset classes to fund. We just need to know how to handle aircraft assets, and I hope banks like SBI, Bank of Baroda, all these people will take the lead and do it.
Well, I'll get to Mr. Tiwari to address that point that you made in just a second, but let me just pick up on one of the issues that you spoke of, and you said that you're making the beginning, you're experimenting with seaplanes, and you want to see how that works before going the full hog. You also talked about execution risk and the execution challenge. Is there something that already is a concern, specific concern, or this is your sort of a legacy grouse, so to speak?
It's not a grouse, it's reality. It's reality in this country. We have, the country with probably the greatest potential, but that potential sometimes doesn't translate into real action.
Where do you
sometimes
believe
it does.
where do you believe the overcomplication could happen?
Let me tell you that, when we did the Udan scheme, we had similar concerns. We had these concerns that, look, this is a fantastic scheme that the government has come up with. Will it actually be executed? And it has been executed superbly well, extremely well. Today, SpiceJet flies 70 flights a day on this Udan scheme. Places which were never connected are suddenly connected. Airports which were just sitting around, doing nothing, today are full. We started a flight to Darbhanga recently. Who the hell had heard? Jharsuguda. No, I had never heard of Jharsuguda before, we decided to start flying there. When Mr. Pradhan, or I think the Civil Aviation Minister, first told me about Jharsuguda, I said, which state is that? So I had no idea, but today flights are completely chock-a-block full. So this is an example of a policy executed extremely well. Some of the work that the government of India, under the leadership of our Minister Secretary, and of course Vandana ji, who's sitting right there, are doing exceedingly well in his cargo. Today, a lot of work being done on ensuring that India has a large piece of the cargo business. So sometimes it's executed brilliantly well, but when it is an interministerial sort of a situation, finance ministry, board of taxes, all these people, and they have these concerns about letting go taxes, the same concerns that we had with the MRO policy. For ages, you kept your MRO, tax rate at 18% GST, and we kept saying to them that, look, guys, 18% of zero is zero. You can put whatever tax rate you want, but if you're not going to get any revenue out of it,
so that's been addressed now.
So it's been sorted, and you can see that some action has started, and hopefully some more can happen. There are still some outstanding glitches. Bharat is sitting there, and he will tell you more about all this. But there are still some glitches, and we're still sorting them out. But of course, at least this government has taken some action in trying to move on some of these issues. So great. So on this Gift City, we have to build confidence. All of us need to start to do at least one transaction out of this place. We have to start building confidence. I think the lessors who set up shop here should be treated well. They shouldn't be harassed by the taxmen. Whatever has been said should actually happen. You have to build confidence over a period of time. It will take time, but it is something which needed to be done, and I congratulate the government for attempting it, for sure.
Well, and at least as far as the alignment is concerned, as you rightly pointed out, what we are seeing with this policy that's been now finally put in place is that there seems to be better alignment between the Aviation Ministry and the Finance Ministry, which seems to be working at this point in time. But let me bring Mr. Tiwari into the conversation to the point that was being made, Mr. Tiwari, by Ajay Singh. Flush with liquidity. Our time is now, and State Bank of India can help the Indian aviation business play a leading role. What role do you see yourself playing as far as this aspiration is concerned?
I feel the weight of all the
expectations,
the entire universe on us. So first of all, thank you, Vandana, for inviting me here, and I'm very happy to be here. And Gift City and the work which is getting done in Aviation Ministry is a great work. All the talk about potential has been said multiple times. I wouldn't repeat it, but just suffice to say that from 700 odd airplanes that we have, including the freighters, to about 2,000 or whatever number that is in 15-20 years time is a growth rate which no other market will see or is seeing at the moment. As far as we are concerned, for Gift City, we already have a branch there. And as regulations improve, what we are doing already is that we are centralizing the disbursals of ECBs, the external commercial borrowings, which we were doing out of all our foreign offices earlier, into this Gift City because the regulations are favorable. As far as the aviation and the leasing part is concerned, on an experience side, we have been funding leasing companies outside from our foreign offices where we have dollar funding resources. And we've done this in the United States. There's a large leasing company called Air Lease. We funded them bilaterally. So we've done a little bit of that. We have a significant portfolio, I mean, not compared to our size, but $500 million is not a small portfolio in funding airplanes. So we've done that. But we have not opened a leasing company so far because clearly the regulations in the RBI had not allowed us to do so far. Now, there is a lot of movement. Mr. Shah had mentioned about this. The declaration of the operating lease of financial products a great way forward, because the Banking Regulation Act did not permit many of these activities. Now those are getting resolved. We have also written to RBI recently to allow some certain other enablements which are necessary for us to do this. And we are very open to this idea because the potential is there. We have done this, and a bank of our size, with the balance sheet we have and the kind of capital this business needs. Because this business is not something you do it once. It needs to constantly expand, do more and more of leasing, and therefore that talk about cross-border is very, very important. So I guess once we have kind of sorted out our own business, we need to have the local region around us and maybe beyond us. I would just request Vadnaji on lighter note that 3.06 needs to become 2.06 for people to come from Ireland. If you just equalize, well, Irish beer is and coffee is still better.
Do you agree? Do you agree, Mr. Singh?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. I think
for us to imagine that just if we equate with Ireland, people will come, why should they? They are having a good enough time, and everything is all set and everything is all very smooth. If you want to pull business, you have to make it significantly more attractive than Ireland for people to come here. There's no question about it. Of course. And just to say that, because it's rupee funding, and so of course that's a benefit. But for lessors to come and set up shop here, they need to be significantly incentivized over Ireland, for sure.
Salil, you want to address that issue?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying a few things. One of the things that India can bring to this is talent, right? And I think the comment was made earlier that if you go to Ireland, if you go to Singapore, you walk into some of these leasing offices, it's half the people are Indian anyways. So we have that talent here. We can develop that here. We can skill, and these are the highest end skills in the world. These are high-end financial services, right? In the US, these are considered seven-figure, like $1 million a year jobs. And these are things that Indians can do in Gift City, and I think that should be a significant attractor. I would say. I would say also, as you set up these leasing companies in India for India, you have this benefit to the overall ecosystem that happens. We've talked a lot about MRO, and there's been this discussion about, now we can move on MRO because of the tax situation being addressed. Well, you also need the demand, right? And of course, yes, with the growth of the fleet, there's going to be demand, but I want to be specific. You need specific demand. And what aircraft leasing brings is specific types of demand. You need demand for maintenance at aircraft transitions. There's demand for interior retrofits as you move an airplane from one airline to the next airline. There's a need for aircraft painting, and as Ajay knows, there is a need for, in today's market, freighter conversions, right? Because some of the largest customers of passenger to freighter conversions to serve the burgeoning e-commerce market, which Ajay is doing, are leasing companies. All of these things are activities that Indian MROs can provide. And so as an OEM, for us, it's not just about growing the leasing market, the financial capital, the human capital for that, but it's growing the ecosystem around it as well. And so that is what India can bring to this, because India has the capability to do those activities at lower cost. And that should also attract players to Gift City.
So will that take care of the disability that we were just talking about, the difference between Ireland and India, and do you believe that this is enough to be put on the table to be able to draw in investments to India?
I think it's a good start. I think you have to start with, I think on the previous panel it was mentioned, the new players, right? So the new players in India, the banks, I would say non-banking finance companies, there are investment companies, there are hedge funds, right, that also want to get into this space. So you start with that. You don't have to necessarily attract a gigantic player from the US or from Europe or from Singapore, right? And as you start with that, and as the Indian market grows, some of these larger players will realize that India is a place that they have to be in order to be competitive in the market, again, because of the human capital that is here, and that will attract them here. So I think it'll be a process, but that's how you do it.
Yeah, and you believe that we've made a start. But let me get Sujoy both into the conversation, because Sujoy, one of the announcements that was made today was on the NIIF and the interest that the NIIF is likely to show in this space. Can you take us through the details of what exactly we should expect, how soon, and what should we realistically believe the NIIF is likely to do for this space?
And sorry to be joining from Mumbai. I would actually say for the for the last 1.5 days, we actually had our investor conference. And many of our investors, for some of the largest pension funds and sovereign funds around the world, are some of the large investors in this business, and they actually are very, I would say, we find the sector very attractive, so obviously we can carry out conversations with them. But at the end of the day, we have to figure out what they're really looking for, and whether it be army, whether it be China, a little different sort of setup. We're really looking for the ability of capitalism at scale, and they are actually looking at the returns they can get putting that capital to work. And as I kind of want to reiterate some of what the fellow panelists have been saying, which is in my mind, the real thing that we should solve for is not really the aircraft that are being operated for India, but really to make this sector a competitive sector. And looking at, and I think, NOPA and IFC are looking at some of the things that make Ireland successful. And in my mind, the real ingredients that India brings to the table is not necessarily the speed of aircraft, but the much more fundamental such as the fact that for the really grown asset, as you've been saying, so if it's small grown assets, it can actually be sold and marketed and traded around the world. I think with IFSC, we actually have a location that can compete with locations like Ireland, which are actually really competitive from the regulatory standpoint. I think there's a primary regulator now to IFSC, which is fantastic. One of the issues that we have to sort out multiple regulations with presenting, I think we just heard that. We have common law that we use in India and the English that we see. And I think these kinds of aspects will allow us to win capital at low competitive way, and that's really what we're trying for. And I agree that expertise is not really an issue. We can bring the expertise, these low of capital or active like tourism, the talent that's with India, that's why they're putting dual college for India. So we are actually, and I think it's also fantastic that we are using a sandbox, to say to test out some of the stuff that we put in place. I think we will continue to work on software in simple things that think organization companies, those kind of aspects need to be part of it. For the sector, we offer a lot of detail that several panelists refer to. But once these aspects are in place, and NR is a fund manager, we're not an agency that just announces. We actually look for these kinds of opportunities, and then we put in place platform operating companies with partners who are within the big operating development. So what we're doing right now is we are very closely looking at what data in India. We are starting to go with partners around the world who can actually put together these companies. Right now, Microsoft partnering with the financing to the company both in India and abroad. And literally once the trade starts in IFSC City, I hope that we will be one of the first to actually set up the out there.
Well, so Joy, you said that you're in a conversation with several partners. Can you take me through how many active conversations are on? By when do you anticipate that you're going to be able to close these?
I think it's somewhat premature to have a perception. This is the way I see it. We need to be able to really perceive scale in the opportunity. If we don't see that we are able to scale somewhere, we are not starting. So we're going to wait to see what happens with the sandbox. Of course, we're going to learn from that, and only then we have multiple conversations. Learn from that. But what we will look for is we will look for an opportunity to build business at scale. If we see all that this is about one of the aircraft, that's not interesting for us. What we want to see is that this kind can be replicated at scale, and also, by the way, the other thing I want to mention is that one of the discussions that we have is by, and then I think the software is we should be able to bring down costs of doing business. Actual costs of doing business is we actually create a solution in India. And that what does it do? At the end of the day, it's actually a savings for the customer. And a savings, by the way, for the manufacturers. And that's really what we're doing. So we're looking at all this stuff. It's still, I wouldn't say that it's tomorrow that we're going to set something up, but it's certainly one of the platforms that we're looking at right now.
Okay, something that you're looking at very carefully. Let me get Mr. Kanta Rao into the conversation and talk about the opportunities that you foresee as far as the defense leasing business is concerned. Mr. Rao, take me through what the plan is, what the playbook looks like.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I also want to thank Vandana for calling me here. First thing is that we, in the last 5 years, when we revised our procedures, we moved from leasing being just a paragraph in our book to now a full-fledged chapter. So that's an ideological leap, and I'm hoping that we'll put into practice very soon. First thing is, this being an aircraft leasing summit, I want to make it clear that we are open to leasing across all the 3 service procurements that we do. We do it for Army, Navy and Air Force. And if you go through what we have written for leasing, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do a few cases. We have started with 1 or 2 cases which are slightly smaller in value, but we hope to do several cases now. But the factor that we need to look at is that leasing, civil leasing and defense leasing are completely different. We have complex platforms, we have qualitative requirements of the services which have to be met in whatever product that you are going to give us for leasing. And there are several modifications involved, and there are several protocols involved in that. So having said that, we have said we will look at leasing if, let's say, we want to have an equipment for a short period of time, or we don't want to own a lot of equipment. I mean, the number of items that we want to buy is not an economic order quantity for us to own, so we may look at leasing. We also said that if something were to be used for just a short-term training purpose, for example, we would look at leasing. And sometimes we want to exploit an equipment for operational reasons, and so we can look at leasing there. And of course, the ultimate decider is going to be the financial implication, whether we're saving money. We also have some emergency requirements coming once in a while, and that becomes another factor whether we quickly want something and we do not have time to go through the normal procedure of acquisition, and we may want to just lease it. And we have, in our procedure, we have what is called an Indian vendor and a global vendor. We have buy Indian, buy global, all those categories. Similarly, we have a lease Indian and a lease global differentiation as well. So we will look at what kind of ownership an Indian vendor has of that equipment or the foreign vendor has, and then we will evaluate. So we have a very elaborate process of RFI and looking at the equipment. The most important factor for the services is that they want a look and feel. I mean, they want the vendor to prove it, a demonstration, a trial in which the vendor proves that this equipment does what the services want it to do.
Well, I just want to pick up on 2 of the points that you raised there. If you can explain to us across the 3 services, which categories, which platforms you believe that this is likely to make most sense, where you see this starting. Secondly, on the point that, the suggestion seems to be that this is probably going to be the avenue for people to be able to test a product, the look and feel, and so, experiment with it before you actually decide on purchase. And is the emergency requirement going to be a large part of fulfillment through the leasing route that you're considering?
I would not want to pinpoint on one particular reason for leasing, but this is a mix of maybe 5-7 factors that will allow us to decide whether to go for leasing or not. As I said, emergency requirement is the foremost, and it all depends on the situation, when we need it, when we don't. And I'm not just saying that a short-term training or an operational requirement is the only reason for us to go for leasing. There can be many other reasons, and we are making a small beginning, and the chapter now allows us to explore. And we are in consultation with Civil Aviation. We are working as to what are the newer ways in which we can get equipment through the leasing chapter.
Okay, so we should expect. Salil, you want to make a point on this?
Yeah, I was just going to provide, when you're ready, I was going to provide a specific example of all the things that our colleague Mr. Kantarao just noted. So he talked about elements of the value proposition, timing. He talked about trying before you buy, training purposes. So Boeing has been advising not just airlines, but also defense customers on leasing opportunities for many, many years. Boeing Capital has been around for 53 years now. There's an example back in the year 2000 with the UK, actually, where the United Kingdom leased Boeing C-17 large transport aircraft. And it was exactly the circumstances that were described. It was the fact that they had a procurement of another OEM's aircraft, which was late. And it was so late that they had an urgent need to get aircraft in. And so they decided to lease Boeing C-17 aircraft. And they were able to train their pilots on those aircraft, and then they leased a third and a fourth, and then they eventually procured more aircraft as well, to the extent that now the UK, based at Brize Norton, the Royal Air Force Base, has 8 of them. And it followed exactly the path that Mr. Kantarao expressed. And so that is absolutely the value proposition that has driven defense leasing in the past. It's a different value proposition from commercial.
Yeah, so a use case there for you to look at, Mr. Rao. But let me get Vishok Mansingh into the conversation as well, the CEO of VMAN Aero Services. Mr. Mansingh, you've been listening to what the panelists have had to say in terms of what the road ahead looks like. Take me through the specifics that you're going to be focusing on as you move ahead, given the opportunity.
In India aviation, whenever we talk about commercial aviation, and we have a small stepson of the commercial aviation, which is general aviation and helicopter, and nobody talks of it. In the last 2 decades, at last we got a seat on table. If you the last 2 decades, the commercial aviation grown at least double-digit growth and very high growth. From at least 100 aircraft, we reach almost 700 aircrafts. But if you look at the general aviation as well as helicopter, the fleet is stagnated, and actually it's reduced. The total combined fleet of general aviation and helicopter is less than a commercial aviation, which is an inward pyramid. All over the world, you have a general aviation, large and business aviation, and then commercial aviation. Here we have a large commercial aviation and very small general aviation. And here is the story. Last look at the commercial aviation, the 90-95% fleet is leased. If you look at general aviation and helicopter in India, less than 15% is on lease. And one of the reasons they don't get lease. We are an asset manager. A lot of time the lease proposal used to come and we used to evaluate the risk, the cash flow, the viability, and most of the time, almost all the time, the potential lessee fails. Then start diving deep what's happening. Then they realize that these are the small leasing companies, specific leasing companies are there which are based outside India, and they are dealing with a mature market. And their matrix is basically for a mature market. So we have decided our own matrix. We look at our local parameters. What is the criteria we should evaluate? And large number of those small general aviation and helicopter proposal just pass through. So there is a potential. It's not question of attracting anybody to set up a leasing company which supports it. So when we start talking to IFC, the speed issue comes. I think we started in the September. Before in 2 months the regulation came, and I had a 2 detailed meeting with the IFC, and it was scheduled only for half an hour. Lasted 3.5 hours, and the time has come, walk the talk. And 19th they put a regulation and immediately formed a company. and we hopefully by March, the company will be formed, we get all regulatory approval, then I am going to do a due diligence, to do a security clearance, and we can expect the first transaction of leasing can happen as early as before 30th April.
Excellent. So congratulations on that. So I'm glad that you have a seat on the table because you actually have a story to tell. That's a good start there. Let me bring John. I think you're on mute, John.
Yeah,
You're unmuted now.
yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't actually hear your question, but good afternoon to everyone in India from Ireland, which of course is a familiar leasing jurisdiction. My congratulations to the Indian cricket team for a fine win. I don't think anyone was impressed with the batsman for the team, but I can tell you everyone was impressed with this stadium which has been built there. And it's not as an interesting metaphor for what you want to do with this exciting framework around leasing based in Ahmedabad. And it shows you, if you build it, they will come. So, on that note, it's been interesting to listen to both panels today. My own observations as a leasing veteran in Ireland are as follows. I think that India has to blaze its own trail here. It's very easy to look at China, Singapore, Hong Kong. Let me tell you, all of them have some flaws. The Chinese have not managed to get lots of international leasing companies into Tianjin or Shanghai. There are reasons for that. Equally, Singapore, where I set up a leasing platform. It's a great country to boast themselves out for finance, but it's a scheme in Singapore. It's a 5-year scheme. You have to renew and reapply to join. So I think India has to go with its strengths. And if you think about it, if you're a gold mine operator, if you want the raw materials, you should have the gold in the ground and you have the labour force. India has 1,000 planes, in the fleet, so 2,000 and it's very young, aspirational workforce. People forget only 6% of people in India are over 65, half of them are under 25. And in addition to this, I think I heard the phrase India's time. The key word here is time. If you think about it, India or Gujarat, especially, is in a great position time zone-wise. I was recently in Dubai for 1 month, and in this part of the world, India and the leasing jurisdiction is going to be able to do business with Japan and China in the morning, and then the Middle East and India in its own time, and then do business in Europe and potentially in Europe as well. There's not many leasing jurisdictions that can say that. I think that's something that I can encourage the promoters of the schemes to develop. And then I think finally, establish proof of concept. You don't have to score a boundary with the first delivery here. My advice would be, I think it was Ajay mentioned sequence. International investors, banks, leasing companies, we just want to see that there is a cohesive method to make it work. It doesn't even have to be much more than a turbo prop. The company in India raises the money, leases the plane, everyone's security interests are effective, and it works smoothly. So, I don't know if that answers your original question, but I had a problem on my side, but there are my observations on what's been fascinating to come up.
Thank you, John. You did actually answer my question without even being able to hear it. So we've got this telepathic connection going. That's good to know. But I just want to take the point that John made and take that across to Ajay Singh. Mr. Singh, to John's point that look, don't obsess about what Ireland did or Singapore did or China did. It is time for India to be able to work on a model that works for India. Maybe even to the point that Mr. Man Singh made here on how they're attempting to do it differently because it requires an Indian matrix. So what would that Indian matrix need to have for us to be able to take this forward?
No, I think John is absolutely right. We shouldn't try and hit that boundary or sixer or whatever it is. Let's just get it right. Let's just do small transactions one at a time and make sure that goes smoothly for all the stakeholders. It goes smoothly for the airline which is leasing the plane. It goes smoothly for the leasing company. And we start to build trust in that entire system. I think that's absolutely the key. I said before,
we need Dravid on the pitch, not Virat Kohli.
We absolutely.
Just take John's point, the cricketing analogy forward.
Yes, absolutely. We need a Dravid or a Cheteshwar Pujara in today's world. But the fact is that we need to get the whole system comfortable with what is going on. We don't want the regulators getting overly excited. Vandana ji in her presentation spoke about light touch regulation. It's very difficult to believe that to be true in India. So we'll see what light touch is when a transaction actually happens. Let it really be light touch. So let us do one small transaction. The reason I mentioned the seaplane and the reason I think that Vishokji mentioned helicopters, these are the kind of transactions that we should really start with. And make sure that they go completely smoothly, and the onus is completely on Vandana ji and the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the Ministry of Finance to make sure, and the Gift City, of course, to make sure that happens smoothly. Let's just do 2 or 3 transactions this year. Make sure that everybody sees that this is smooth and easy, which is not always the case in India. We have a bad reputation for making things overly difficult for ourselves and for all our stakeholders. So let's make sure that people say, oh wow, great, this went really well, and then we can take it from there.
So get the foundation right and then build on it. Mr. Tiwari, let me ask you, because a lot of the conversation was also around Rupee Raftar, and that's the big aspiration that the government is focusing on. But realistically, how do you see that going?
Yeah, so the question about whether we can pay the lease rentals in rupee is a big question, and Mr. Hejmadi in the earlier panel alluded to it, and also a number of other people. See, you have to understand one thing: the aircraft manufacturers are not in India, so they have to be paid in dollars. Now, if they have to be paid in dollars, the leasing company which buys the plane has to pay in dollars, whether it is set up by a bank or anybody else. And therefore, the rupee, the revenues in India by airlines are in rupees. So that's how it has been happening so far. So the question is that in Gift City, a number of steps have already been taken, and that's what gives me a lot of positivity. We have to deepen this market in Gift City, which have to make it very liquid, so that the dollar, or for that matter any other currency, is freely fungible and comes in and goes out. And of course, tax enablements have already been made. So we are already present there, and we're working with this, that as we get in more foreign fund managers, more money from outside, then this problem of hedging, which is the big cost, and believe me, we've offered rupee funding to airlines sometimes, and it so happens that the dollar cost works out cheaper. So it's, and every airline is looking at a lease rate factor, which is basically the lease rentals or the cost of the aircraft to be less as possible, 0.5 or less. And that's not currently possible in India. So we've got to bring that down, and this will only happen if the market deepens. The bond market, which is a significant part of all lease companies' funding, also deepens. So a whole lot of work needs to be done. But as Mr. Singh said, and as so many people have said, we need to take one step at a time. Make sure that is right. Wherever we falter, where we feel this is a weak link, Vandana is there, Mr. Shah is there, so many other people are there willing. With a single regulator, we hope that all of this will be taken care of, and we are there to support it.
Excellent. Let me throw this open to our audience here. I know there's many who have questions. Go ahead.
So, question to you.
Can I sit or you want me to stand?
No, it's fine. Go.
I'll repeat your question for the audience, so go ahead.
So you have had experience in leasing a military aircraft to the UK government. Now, the Charlie 17 is a transport. What happens in the event you get a requirement from any government to lease an aircraft that is going to be in the line of fire? Does it still take place, and if so, what's the difference, especially when you talk insurance?
Yeah, so that is a very challenging. So the question that was asked was, leasing in defense works and has worked for transport aircraft that are, quote, not in the line of fire. What happens when you have an aircraft that's in the line of fire? And to be very frank, that's something that's still to be tested. There are many issues around that. One is insurance, but I think there's even another one, which is around use restrictions, right? So I'll give you an example. It can be one for aircraft in the line of fire or not, right? Let's say there's a country that leases, doesn't have to be India, leases aircraft to the UK. Okay, but that country, who's the originator of the aircraft, has sanctions against a third country that the UK wants to use that aircraft in or against. Guess what? You can't use that aircraft in that sanctioned country. So there are complexities in leasing for defense that don't exist as much in commercial. And so these are some of the things that have to be worked out if you're going to do leasing for defense. So it's a very challenging question, and frankly, it's one that the global leasing community doesn't have a perfect answer for yet, because you do see these challenges that crop up and restrictions on use. If you were going to use an aircraft that was going to be in the line of fire, would the leasing country, right, the country where the OEM that's doing the leasing is based, would there be restrictions on where you could use it in the line of fire based on who the allies of that originating country are? As you can see, it gets very, very complicated.
I'm sure it's complex and complicated, and Mr. Rao, you're probably dealing with many of these complexities as of today. But take us through some of the real challenges that you face as you try and move ahead with some of these use cases.
First thing is that leasing is a new chapter in our procedure, and we have to really test out some of these complexities. We have made provisions to look at the risk factor, the insurance and all that, and we will work it out as a case comes up. So right now we have not encountered that, but as I said, the defense acquisition is a complex process. It has a lot of requirements which are not there readily available on a civil aircraft or whatever is in the market off the shelf. So we take a long time in trying to explain our requirements, work with OEMs, we sit with them, we discuss with them, and then come up with a model which is deliverable, let's say, in certain time, and then it is brought and proven to us, shown to us, demonstrated to us. So good question, and these will be taken care as and when we work out a case.
When do you expect the first leasing arrangement to take off?
Yeah, the last time you asked this question, I tried to avoid it.
I'm coming back in a different direction now.
As I said, it's completely emergency.
You can tell me, but then you'll have to kill me, is it?
Emergency, operational, so on and so forth, but we'll get to know.
Okay, we should hopefully get to know shortly. Yes, Vandana.
So mine are less questions but more reactions perhaps. So it always surprises me when people speak about insurance risk or any end-use risks when we're looking at defense procurements or any. The commercial world gives us enough pointers to it. So for instance, whenever a commercial tanker is going into the Gulf of Aden, they face a sudden surge of either piracy or any other condition which is quite similar to a defense mission mode challenges, and I'm sure that they have dealt with them earlier. Similarly for use restrictions. So is a tanker that is going into the Gulf of Aden, has it always been allowed to go into war-torn zones or even South Sea, South China Sea for instance, where you could have anything else happening? So when big finance tells us that they are looking for solutions from 2 or 3 aircraft procurements or leases, and that's when they'll feel comforted that they're going to be able to bring in big money, it really bothers me, because their ability to take that risk on the big 2 or 3 aircraft is much more than what Vishrok is very, in a very gung-ho way. He's going and saying, I'm doing this, I'm putting where my money where my mouth is. So something, this is for the big business. It's high time the big boys started playing.
Let me get the big boys to respond to that comment.
Yeah. You know, and even this is not to put too fine a point on it. When we worked out the 3.06, we actually took the worst assumptions, the most conservative. Being a bureaucrat, I had to do that. I didn't want to put numbers out there. Provided the negotiation is done right, that number comes to 1.44. So why is it that we bureaucrats, babus, can find those numbers, but all of you can't find those numbers? Okay. You know, and we've been more light touch for the past 2.5 years than anything. We don't even wait for a piece of paper to come to us before we take action. So next time I get a call from you, I'm going to ask for a paper.
Mr. Singh,
I'm in trouble. I'm in a lot of trouble here. But you know, it's not light touch. The Civil Aviation Ministry actually works exceedingly smoothly with the few operators that they have. It's very interactive. It works really well. But the moment you get beyond the pale of the ministry itself, it becomes, of course, much more complex. But you know, we need to also think of some radical stuff that we can do here to promote this leasing out of Gift City. I mean, perhaps we can create real incentives, specific, solid incentives beyond what Ireland has done and so on. And I think some of them could be as crazy as saying, okay, anything which gets leased out of Gift City, we know the tail numbers. Let's say there'll be no excise duty charged on ATF. So let's think of some out-of-the-box solutions to make this like really, really attractive, and then maybe it can move a little faster. But people like John Duffy, who are real veterans in this space, we need to consult with them a lot more. They've been through this. They've done this for so many years. So many of them are friends of India and friends of airlines in India, and we must definitely engage them and get advice on what went wrong in various other jurisdictions and what we can avoid here.
So let me then get John to close this panel. John, as Ajay Singh pointed out, this is not your first rodeo. So as you wrap things up here, leave us with your thoughts on the do's and the don'ts as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I hope you can hear me better this time. I think on the matter of lights, with the umpires, you always have to be careful how you manage but I think an interesting way forward, to pick up on the point that I just mentioned, would be to get together in a room informal stakeholders, such as international lease companies, perhaps. It's hard to do it in these early times, but looking at the numbers that are coming down, could even be done something like Dubai, for example, which is quickly needs to get to for a number of people as a natural nexus with India anyway. And have some kind of round table event where perhaps away from the prime line tuning route, you can actually say to leasing professionals, tell us what we really need to do here. And people can be a bit more honest and open without any concerns. I would even go as far as, I like Ajay's comment there about exercises. It would be really good if you said to an airline located in the phone numbers what these planes, for the first year of the lease, if this aircraft is used in India or out of India, perhaps in especially says that if it's outside India, so we can do leasing outside, then perhaps some of the taxation on the company for that aircraft or revenue return from that route, there was a small tax holiday there. Ireland has not done that. I don't think anyone's done it. And I don't think it's beyond the gift of, as I say, the authorities in India to come up with some very, very creative things. And my final point would be on the internationalisation, if you like. There was only recently in a meeting with Sonia from Aviation India that he pointed out to me that the largest private sector employer of human beings in the UK now is the Tata Group. Tata Steel, Jaguar Land Rover in the past. So I think India, again, has to, don't be shy about expressing themselves. You have the raw materials, you have the aircraft, you have people, build it and let it up.
John, that's the perfect note to close this conversation on. Many thanks for joining us and taking us through what you believe are some of the challenges that we will face, but also more importantly, highlighting the opportunities and how India can leverage those. Many thanks to Mr. Kanta Rao, Salil, Mr. Man Singh, Mr. Tiwari, and Mr. Singh for joining us here today with very specific, sharp interventions and insights, giving us a real sense of what the ground reality looks like. And thank you very much to Vandana Agarwal for helping the Aviation Ministry put this together. I've certainly enjoyed being part of this conversation, so thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here today.
Photo.